Scarlet and Violet's first DLC, the Teal Mask, has been out for just over a week at this point, and with its release, we have seen the return of quite a few Pokemon to Generation 9, as well as the introduction of some new Pokemon in the Teal Mask DLC. And I think it's about time we take a look at every single returning Pokemon and new Pokemon in the DLC and rank these guys, both based off my personal preference for Pokemon, what I think about them, and their use in the game, whether that be as a raid Pokemon, as a playthrough Pokemon, or even competitively. So with that, let's take a look at all the returning Pokemon and see how they stack up. Let's get to it. So for our tier list today, we are going with an S, A, B, C, D ranking on this one, just to make things nice and simple. S rank, of course, being the top tier Pokemon, the best, the god tier, and D tier Pokemon being Pokemon that I either just don't care about or Pokemon that are absolutely garbage. So kicking things off for this tier list, we have Arbok. Arbok being a returning Pokemon from Gen 1, which if you know me, Gen 1 has a very special place in my heart. Arbok, in my opinion, is not terrible. It is just straight poison type. It gets the ability Intimidate, which immediately elevates its status for me. It has a solid physical attack stat, as well as some, they're half decent other stats as well. I would definitely say it's B tier. It's not amazing, but at the same time, it's also not garbage. Next up on the list, we have your boy Saiyan/, another Gen 1 returning Pokemon. You're gonna see that that is very much a theme for this DLC. Saiyan/ being ground type, with the ability Saiyan Veil and Saiyan Rush, both super useful during your playthrough of this if there were any Sandstorms in the game, which there really aren't. As far as stats go, we have a mid to decent attack stat, a super solid defense stat, and that's really about it. Saiyan/ special place in my heart. I would say is definitely B tier in my eyes. It has its use in either a playthrough or a raid, or even in competitive, if you're doing it just for fun, as a super bulky, like, tank Pokemon, but other than that, it doesn't serve much use. It's cool, it's just not super useful. Next up in our ever-going list of returning Gen 1 Pokemon, we have Clefable. Clefable being just straight fairy typing, and honestly being one of the more decent Pokemon to come out of like the Gen 1 Pokemon returning to the game. We get some good abilities with this one, Cute Guard and Cute Charm and Magic Guard, both being, you know, pretty solid. Stats on this guy, 95 special attack and HP and 90 special defense. It is a pretty solid special attacker with some pretty solid stats. Along with its moveset, I think Clefable, in my opinion, is honestly pretty A tier. A lot of people don't think that, but man, Clefable is just, it's such a good Pokemon. So, A tier Pokemon, first one on the list. Next up, we have one of my favorite Gen 1 Pokemon, actually one of my favorite Pokemon of all time. We have Ninetails. Ninetails being a straight fire Pokemon that does get access to several fairy type moves via level up and via TM, who is also just a special defense tank and one of the fastest Pokemon out there. He's just ridiculously fast. Base 100 speed and special defense is absolutely crazy. Plus, you can't tell me that you didn't look at Ninetails the first time you saw it and just immediately fell in love with this Pokemon. This one, especially with the ability Flash Fire, definitely A tier Pokemon. Super easy decision on that one. You know what? This might as well just be a Gen 1 tier list at this point, because our next Pokemon is none other than Poliwrath. Just an absolute monster of a Pokemon. Water and fighting type, has the ability Water Absorb and Swift Swim, making it not only able to just ignore water moves altogether, but could also be incredibly fast in the rain as well. Stats are absolutely crazy on this one. 95 base attack and defense with 90 base special defense and HP. Gets a sick moveset, and the design for this guy, I mean, he just looks angry all the time, and I love him for it. In my opinion, another A tier Pokemon for a wide variety of reasons. Continuing the Gen 1 train, we have Victreebel as the next Pokemon on our list. Victreebel being grass and poison type, its only really notable ability is Gluttony. It also gets access to Chlorophyll, which is, I mean, it's decent. Some pretty solid base stats with, 105 base attack and 100 base special attack. So it is a super hyper offensive Pokemon, and its moveset is, it's nothing to slouch at. However, Victreebel is just one of those Pokemon that I look at it, I understand why people like it, I understand why it's good, I just don't agree with it. Being grass and poison type, it's alright, okay? I'm gonna throw this one as a solid C Pokemon. That may change later on. Next on the list, we have your boy Golem. Golem being just one of those Pokemon as a kid I absolutely loved, because he was so difficult to get because of how hard trading was in Gen 1. Rock and ground type, gets access to Rockhead and Sturdy as his abilities, along with Sandveil, but base stats on this guy are absolutely insane. 120 base attack, 130 base defense, but definitely suffers in the speed and special attack column for this one, as well as having more than a few type weaknesses. I mean, this dude gets hit for super effective damage by quite a lot of stuff, so that physical defense really doesn't mean a whole lot at that point. This, along with the fact that this Pokemon again is only available via trade in the DLC, is gonna put this one at a C tier for me. It's a phenomenal Pokemon. I love the design of it. It's just not there. We're gonna hop over to the Teal Mask DLC Pokemon now, the new Pokemon to the game, and we're starting off with, quite honestly, one of the most hyped up Pokemon of all time. This is Diplin. Diplin is the new evolution of Applin, along with Flapple and Appleton. It is still Grass and Dragon. It has a solid defense and special attack stat on this one. Its ability is Super Sweet Syrup. It is a new ability for this guy that lowers the evasiveness of the opposing Pokemon, so is phenomenal going up against things like, Alolan Muck. Does take quite a bit of damage from quite a few different things, but overall, I love the design of this. I love how hyped up this was, and honestly, I could see some use for it going forward. And you know what? I'm biased on this one. I'm gonna put this guy in the A tier category. One of my favorite design Pokemon that I've seen in a long time. Our next Teal Mask DLC Pokemon we have is Sinister, the evolution of Poltergeist, another very hyped up Pokemon for this DLC. I mean, it even got its own intro trailer. It's like the haunting tale of Poltergeist. Made a big production out of it, and honestly, it's pretty solid. It's grass and ghost type. Its ability is Hospitality, which means that when it's swapped in, it heals its ally if it is in a double battle. It also has the ability Heat Proof, which is honestly pretty solid. Base special attack of 121 and base physical defense of 106 means that this thing is an absolute monster, as well as getting access to some new moves like Matcha Gotcha, which not only has the Giga Drain effect, but has the chance to burn as well. This one, honestly, kind of controversial. I know people don't like the way it looks. I'm gonna put this as my first S tier Pokemon of this. I think Poltergeist could honestly be pretty solid and have a lot of use both in-game, in raid, and as well as may see some usage competitively as well. It is honestly top tier in my book. Moving forward, we have the Loyal 3, starting off with your boy Okey Doki, my favorite of the Loyal 3, the one that I was looking forward to the most. It is poison fighting and has the ability Toxic Chain, which means that you have a chance to harshly poison your opponent when you are attacking. Base attack of 128 and physical defense of 115 means this thing is an absolute monster physically. Doesn't really have that many weaknesses and really resists quite a few things as well. Gets access to a solid move pool, and honestly, the design is just really cool. This one, out of the Loyal 3, is one of my favorites, but it's not the one I'm going to put at S tier. I'm actually going to put Okey Doki at A tier. So bear with me with this one. Next up, we have Monkey Dory, who is poison and psychic type. And instead of being a strong physical attacker, is a strong special attacker. Base special attack of 130, special defense of 90, and speed of 106. Meaning that this guy is an absolute monster. Only takes double damage from 3 typings, resists several typings, and gets access to quite a large move pool of special attacking moves that, honestly, I could see this one being super useful in raids more than I could in competitive. Honestly, it's super fast and it's kind of a monster. This one, while not my favorite of the loyal 3, honestly, this one's probably my least favorite. I am still going to put in A tier because game recognized game on this one. And the final Pokemon out of the loyal 3 for this list is Pheasant Dippity, the bird Pokemon who is poison and fairy typing. Again, has the ability Toxic Chain, and its hidden ability is Technician. This one, instead of being like super focused in either physical or special, is kind of the all-arounder, with its base attack being 91, special attack being 70, special defense being 125, and its speed being 99. It is a solid all-arounder. It gets access to quite the move pool of moves that it can use, meaning that this one is honestly quite a force to be reckoned with, both physically and special attacking. Out of the loyal 3, I would say Pheasant Dippity is definitely my first, or my only S tier out of the loyal 3 on this one. Next up, we have Ogre Pawn, the box art Pokemon for the Teal Mask, and honestly, this one is just, there's nothing else to say other than Ogre Pawn is kind of a menace, okay? Number 1, it gets 4 different forms depending on which mask it has. Its base stats, attack is 120, special defense is 96, speed is 110, and its other stats are still pretty solid as well. And its ability changes depending on which mask it has. Its brand new move that it gets, Ivy Cudgel, changes based off of what Terra type it has, and this thing is just, it's very strong and it's very broken. From a VGC standpoint, this thing is going to be crazy, and from the standpoint of like raids, this thing is going to be absolutely monstrous as well. So Ogre Pawn in all of its forms is going to be an S tier Pokemon for me. Pretty easy choice to put this guy up in S tier. Moving right along, we have Wheezing. Wheezing, number 1, is a defensive tank. Straight poison type, base physical defense of 120 and base physical attack of 90. This thing is a unit, but the thing that makes this one impressive is its ability neutralizing gas, which allows it to neutralize other Pokemon's ability. And in the VGC standpoint, being able to stop things like Intimidate or using a Tatsugiri and Dondozo as commander, or even suppressing the Ruins Pokemon's ability is just absolutely mind-numbing to me. So with just that in mind, Wheezing, as far, like, from a VGC standpoint, is a solid A tier Pokemon, in my opinion. As far as a playthrough Pokemon, though, and its usefulness outside of neutralizing gas, it's honestly pretty B tier for me. So, B tier, overall, definitely A tier for its ability. Next up, we have the OG Sleepy Boy, Snorlax. And I mean, come on, do I really need to say anything about this one? Snorlax is the OG Sleepy Pokemon. Its normal typing, its ability is Thick Fat, or Immunity, or Gluttony, depending on what you have it as. Base HP of 160. Honestly, one of the highest base HPs in the game. Physical attack of 110, special defense of 110. It is incredibly slow, but man, this thing is a monster. And talk about a Pokemon that just has so many moves that can be used with it. Snorlax, from a playthrough standpoint, is honestly A tier. However, taking into account its usage in VGC and given the current meta, I don't think you're going to see it as much as people think you are. I'm going to say Snorlax is probably going to be B tier in my book as well. Next up on our list, we have Ferret, who is the evolution of Sentret, moving away from Gen 1 finally. Ferret, normal typing, its abilities Runaway, Keen Eye, and Frisk. Base stats are really pretty unimpressive on this one, other than its speed being base 90, HP being base 85. It's not super impressive. It doesn't have a lot of weaknesses. You know, it takes no damage from Ghost type. It takes double damage from Fighting type. It really isn't going to see any, like, play in VGC. I don't see it being useful in raids, and I really don't think, other than, like, collecting it, people really aren't going to use it in its in their party. However, it is still cool. It's a decently solid Pokemon, and I do like Ferret, so I will put it as a C tier Pokemon, in my opinion. Next up on the list, another Gen 2 boy, we have Noctel. Noctel being normal and flying type. Really, Noctel, again, is kind of in the same vein as Sentret. There's nothing really special about it. Its base HP is 100, special defense is 96, and special attack is 86. It's definitely not a physical attacker. It gets access to some decent moves in its move pool. I mean, we're talking things like, you know, Dream Eater, Moonblast, Confusion, and then things like Air Slash, as well as the ability, or the move Roost, which is super useful. Makes this one halfway decent, but again, it's one of those, people really aren't going to use it in their playthrough, and I don't see a spot for it in raids or competitive. So I'm going to throw this guy down in the C category with these bad boys down here. Next up on the Gen 2 section of this tier list, we have Iiridos. Iiridos is another one of those Pokemon that is really just unimpressive. It's bug and poison type. Its ability is Swarm, which is probably its best ability that it has. Base physical attack of 90, and that's really its only impressive stat. It's got some decent moves to it, but again, I don't think this is going to be one that people are going to be using for anything other than completing the Pokedex. So it is going to join these guys down in the C tier. Next up though, Politoed. This is where things get interesting. Politoed here, being honestly one of the best Pokemon and one of the ones I was most excited for to return in the DLC. Water type, its abilities are Water Absorb, Drizzle, and Damp, meaning that this guy is straight up going to replace Pelipper as the water setter on a lot of VGC teams. Base stats, 90 in HP, 90 in special attack, and 100 in special defense. It is definitely a special attacker, and its move pool is honestly pretty impressive. Not only do you get Rain Dance in here in case Drizzle runs out, but you also get Hydro Pump as well, and then we get access to moves like, you know, Bubble Beam, Water Gun, Mud Shot, meaning that this one is not only going to be super viable as a playthrough Pokemon, but as a VGC Pokemon, as well as a raid support Pokemon as well. Politoed is definitely A tier Pokemon in my book. Skipping over a couple here because we're only focused on final forms for this tier list. We have Mightiana, honestly one of my favorite Gen 3 Pokemon. Straight up dark typing, has access to Intimidate, which is honestly phenomenal. For this one, base physical attack of 90 is really its biggest trait here. However, base HP of 70 and base defense of 70 as well is honestly not terrible. Doesn't take a lot of like super effective damage from different typings. Doesn't really take like resist anything as well. Gets a solid move pool as well of physical type moves that you would expect from a Pokemon like Mightiana. And it's one of those that I could definitely see people using this in their playthrough, but it's probably not going to be a raid or a VGC Pokemon at this point, meaning Mightiana is definitely going to be a B tier Pokemon. Next up, Ludicolo, one of my favorite guys ever. He's just such a good Pokemon, and I love him. Water and grass type, a phenomenal combo for this one. Gets access to Swift Swim and Rain Dish as abilities. Base special attack of 90 and special defense of 100, meaning he is a solid special attacking Pokemon that has some decent bulk to him. Really only takes super effective damage from, 3 types, but only resists 3 types as well and takes normal damage from everything else. And has a solid move pool of both water and grass type moves at his arsenal. Ludicolo is definitely a Pokemon that I could see being useful for very specific raids. Probably not so much in the VGC side of things, and is definitely going to be more for a lot of people than just a Pokemon that sits in a box. So Ludicolo, B tier Pokemon in my opinion. Next up we have Shifttree. Shifttree being another, interesting Pokemon for this tier list. It is grass and dark type with the abilities Chlorophyll and Pickpockets. Base stats of 90 HP, 100 attack, and 90 special attack. So it is definitely a solid hyper offensive Pokemon. However, it takes super effective damage from quite a few different types. I mean, we're at what, like at least 6 different types. While it does resist quite a few as well, that doesn't negate the fact that it really doesn't make it useful for a whole lot. This one is honestly probably going to sit in most people's boxes anyway, so C tier Pokemon in my opinion. The next two we're just going to knock out right now, Volbeat and Illumise. First two D tier Pokemon. I really could care less about these two. In my opinion, they really don't serve any purpose other than completing the Pokedex. Next up though, we have Crawdaunt. Crawdaunt being water and dark type, its abilities being Shell Armor, Hypercutter, and Adaptability. Base physical attack of 120 and special attack of 90. Special defense and speed though are both incredibly low on this guy. Defense isn't bad, HP's not great. Does take super effective damage from like 5 different typings, but also resists quite a few as well. And its move pool is something else. So Crawdaunt is one of those that is definitely used as a playthrough Pokemon, could definitely be used in raids, but probably isn't going to see a whole lot of VGC action. So he is definitely going to go in the B tier in my book. Next up, we have arguably one of the best Gen 3 Pokemon ever, maybe one of the best Pokemon of all time, and that is Milotic. Milotic is just straight water type. Gets access to Marvel Scale, Competitive, and Cute Charm as its abilities. Base stats 90 in its 95 in its HP, 100 base special attack, as well as 125 special defense. And its other stats are pretty decent as well. This one is honestly a pretty solid all-around Pokemon. Only takes super effective damage from electric and grass type, but resists 4 other types as well. The downside to this one is definitely evolving Feebas into Milotic. They made that a lot easier with the Prism Scale. Having to do this via Beauty in Gen 3 was an absolute nightmare. And the fact that this one gets access to moves like Scald is just absolutely insane in my book. So Milotic is definitely one of those that will probably see a lot of playthrough on people's raid teams as well as their gameplay teams, and may very well see some VGC play as well. So Milotic, as well as just being a phenomenal Pokemon, is definitely, you know what, I would say S tier. Next up we have Chimicho, which honestly, in my opinion, this one's pretty quick. I'm gonna put this one down in D tier. Along with being incredibly difficult to catch, having a low catch rate, is just one of those Pokemon that people really, I don't think, use on their team. It's another one of those Pokemon that people just catch to, they just catch to complete their Pokedex and maybe use it once or twice at the beginning of their playthrough, and then it sits in a box for the remainder of its lifespan, till it's inevitably traded or released. So, make this one easy, D tier Pokemon. Next up, we have these Sinnoh starters making their return to the DLC. Even though you can only get one, you can only get one during your playthrough, you can absolutely trade for and have all 3 at the same point. So starting off with Torterra, Torterra being grass and ground type with some solid numbers for its HP and physical attack and physical defense. Does take super effective damage from 4 different types and resists 2 others, but that ground grass typing means that it gets access to a wide variety of moves that just makes this thing a monster. This one honestly will probably be on a lot of people's playthrough teams. It'll probably be very useful in raids and may see some VGC play as well. Torterra, I'm definitely going to put as a B tier Pokemon out of the 3. Infernape, on the other hand, Infernape is just an absolute monster of a Pokemon. Infernape being fire and fighting type, getting access to the ability Blaze and Iron Fist. Iron Fist boosting all of its punching type moves by 20% off the bat. With base stats in its physical attack of 104, special attack of 104, and speed of 108, makes this thing an absolute monster, and its move pool is nothing to scoff at. This one will definitely see use in people's playthroughs, as well as in raids and VGC. This one, in my opinion, out of the 3, is definitely A tier. Which brings us to our final Sinnoh starter, Empoleon. Empoleon being water and steel type and having a massive change to its abilities for its intro into Gen 9. As it no longer gets Defiant, that has now been replaced with the ability Competitive, which honestly elevates this one up even more. Base special attack of 111 and special defense of 101 with solid HP and physical defense already. Makes this thing an absolute unit. It only takes super effective damage from 3 typings. However, resists the majority of other typings in the game. Its moveset also just being an absolute monstrosity to deal with means that Empoleon is definitely going to see usage in gameplay, in raids, and will definitely see usage in VGC. Honestly, we'll probably see quite a bit. So Empoleon, out of the 3 Sinnoh starters, S tier in my opinion. Next up, we have Ambit Palm, another trade Pokemon for the DLC. Being normal typing, its main ability being Technician is the one that really stands out on this one. Base physical attack of 100 and base speed of 115 makes this thing not only speedy, but has a solid physical attack as well. Being normal type means it only takes super effective damage from fighting type and takes no damage from ghost type whatsoever. And its move pool is pretty decent. This one will honestly probably see some play in people's playthroughs, probably not in raids though. However, because it is a trade-only Pokemon, I am definitely going to put this one down at C tier just because of how hard it is to get if you don't have friends to trade with. Next up, we have Gliscor, the Scarlet exclusive DLC Pokemon. It is ground and flying type and has the ability has the ability Hyper Cutter, as well as Poison Heal and Sand Veil. A base defense of 125 and a base speed of 95, as well as a base attack of 95, makes this thing honestly kind of a monster. Takes super effective damage from water, as well as quad damage from ice, and resists 3 other types, takes no damage from 2 types. Means that it's pretty solid. Has a super solid move pool that is has a lot of variation to it, and this is one that people will probably use during their playthrough, but probably won't see a lot of usage in raids or VGC. So I'm gonna put this guy at a solid B tier for this one. Next up, we have Yanmega. Yanmega being bug and flying type with the ability Speed Boost. Has a base special attack of 116 and base speed of 95, meaning that it is a super solid special attacker, and its other stats are nothing to slouch at, except its special defense, which is honestly kind of lacking. Does take super effective damage from quite a few different typings, as well as quad effective damage from rock. And its move pool is honestly, it's pretty decent. And I think this one could end up being a super solid raid Pokemon, depending on what type of raid you are going into. I know this one sees usage on people's playthrough teams because people just love Yanmega. So I'm going to put this one at a solid B tier. Next up, we have the defensive tank that is Probopass. Probopass, my goodness. Okay. First of all, gets the ability Sturdy as well as Magnet Pull. It is Rock and Steel type. Base physical defense of 145 and base special defense of 150. However, it is very slow and has horrible attacking stats. So it is really only good as a defensive tank is what it is. Resists quite a few types, like the majority of types, and really only takes quad effective damage from fighting as well as ground typing. It has a pretty solid moveset that consists of mainly status moves that don't deal a ton of damage, and we'll probably see some usage in people's playthroughs, but probably nothing more than that. So Probopass, while still awesome, is gonna find his way down to the C tier category. And I just realized that I passed over Mamoswine. So Mamoswine is next up. Honestly, one of my favorite Pokemon. Mamoswine, being ice and ground type, gets the abilities Oblivious, Snowcloak, and Thick Fat, which is huge. Base physical attack of 130, as well as a base HP of 110, means that he is not only bulky, but has the attack stats to back that up as well. Takes super effective damage from quite a few different typings. Doesn't really resist a whole lot. However, his moveset, whew, this guy's moveset is just absolutely phenomenal. Wide variety and some heavy hitting moves. Mamoswine is one of those that will definitely be a solid raid Pokemon, as well as a solid playthrough Pokemon, and honestly is just one of my favorites. Okay? So, sue me on this one. I'm putting Mamoswine as an A tier Pokemon because of its versatility and its base stats. Next up, we have Dusk Noir. Dusk Noir is straight ghost type. That's all there is to it. It has the abilities Pressure and Frisk. Base stats of 135 in its defense, 135 in its special defense, and 100 in its attack. However, its HP and speed stats are god awful. Being ghost type, it doesn't take damage from normal or fighting type. Takes super effective damage from dark and ghost type, and that's pretty much it. It resists 2 other types. Its move pool is honestly pretty solid, and Dusk Noir is just, he's a cool looking Pokemon. However, it is a trade only Pokemon. And trade only Pokemon and I have a problem in the fact that if you do not have a friend to trade with, they are very difficult to get. I don't even want to hear about it that Poliwrath is up here. I don't even want to hear about it. He's just too good to be true. Okay. So Dusk Noir will definitely have quite a bit of use. It's going to be a B tier Pokemon for sure. Next up, we have Conkeldurr. Yes, I'm skipping over the legendaries. We have Conkeldurr, who is straight fighting type, gets the ability Guts, which is honestly phenomenal, as well as Iron Fist. Base stats of 140 in its physical attack, which is absolutely monstrous. But its special attack and speed greatly suffer for that. Conkeldurr also being a Pokemon that is trade only, means that that's going to hurt its ranking a little bit. Conkeldurr, in my opinion, it's good, but it's not good enough to be in the B tier slot. So Conkeldurr, in my opinion, is definitely a C tier Pokemon. If it was not a trade Pokemon, it would probably be B tier, but that trade only just kind of bumps that down for me just a little bit. Next up, we have Leavanny. Leavanny is honestly, even though I don't like it as a Pokemon, is a super solid Pokemon. It's Bug and Grass type, base 103 attack and 92 speed, has a total base stat calculation or total base stat of 500, meaning that it is honestly, it's pretty decent. Bug and grass type is a pretty decent combination. It resists quite a bit, takes super effective damage from quite a few things, and quad effective damage, obviously, from fire and flying. But its moveset kind of makes up for that in the fact that it does get access to quite a few super solid bug type and grass type moves. So, for that reason, I'm going to put Leavanny as C tier. It's good, it has its use case in a playthrough. However, I don't think it's going to see use in anything other than in-game play. I don't think it's going to be a good raid Pokemon, or necessarily a good VGC Pokemon at that. Next up, we have Swanna, Ducklet's Evolution. This one really shouldn't need a whole lot of explaining. It's D tier. I guarantee you 90% of you, or 90% of you watching this probably caught that and it's sitting in a box, or you caught it and immediately wonder traded it or released it. It's water and flying, its base stats are not that great. Regardless of the moves that it gets, it's just not going to see that much use in even regular gameplay. Definitely D tier. Mienshao, on the other hand, honestly, pretty solid, pretty decent Pokemon. Straight up fighting type, Inner Focus, Regenerator, and Reckless as its abilities. Base stats of 125 in its physical attack, 95 in its special attack, and 105 in its speed means that this thing is an absolute monster. Has a super decent move pool full of various fighting type moves that it can use. And honestly, this is one that I can see a lot of people using in their playthrough and possibly for some lower tier raids, but I don't think it's ever going to be a super high value Pokemon. So for that fact, it stays in the C tier. Even though, you know what? We'll put Mienshao in B tier just because it deserves it. Next up, we have Mandibuzz. Mandibuzz being one of those that, it's a solid Pokemon. It's dark and flying type. Its abilities Big Peck, Overcoat, and Weak Armor. Some pretty solid stats. HP of 110, defense of 105, and special defense of 95 means that it's very tanky. However, its special attack suffers greatly. It's only 55. Takes super effective damage from more Pokemon than it actually resists at this point, and while its moveset is super solid, it is definitely a Pokemon that I don't think a lot of people are going to use for anything other than part of their playthrough. So, Mandibuzz, definitely C tier Pokemon. Next up, we have Trevenant. Trevenant being Ghost and Grass type, the exact same typing as Sinister is, with a monstrous physical attack stat, 110 base attack. However, it is very slow and its defensive stats are not all that impressive. Does get access to some decent moves, however, but does take a super effective damage from quite a few different types. Although it is an awesome looking Pokemon, I would definitely say this is one that is probably going to see some usage in more than just playthroughs. I don't know exactly what yet, but it's probably going to see at least some usage. So I'm going to throw this one up in the B tier. Still a solid Pokemon, not necessarily the best though. Next up on the list, we have Vikavolt. Vikavolt being Bug and Electric typing, a very interesting typing. Gets access to Levitate as its only ability that it can use. Has a monstrous special attack stat, base 145, however is insanely slow, and its defensive stats, while not terrible, are not the best that we've seen. Bug and Electric type is really interesting. It only takes super effective damage from fire and rock type, and resists electric, grass, fighting, and steel type, and takes no damage from ground because of its ability. Honestly, this one, with the amount of different moves that the amount of different moves in its learn set, is honestly, it's pretty good. Like, it's super good. It's good enough. I actually think I'm gonna put Vikavolt up in the A tier, and that's saying something because I really do not care for Vikavolt that much, personally. However, game recognized game on this one. It's a solid Pokemon. Next on the list, we have Ribombee, and yeah, this one is kind of interesting. It's bug and fairy type, gets some honestly pretty decent abilities, Sweet Veil, Shield Dust, and Honey Gather, has an absurd speed stat, base 124 and a base 95 special attack stat. So, not terrible by any means whatsoever. However, its attack stat is not great, and its HP and defense stats are not all that impressive either. That, however, is kind of negated by the fact that it takes super effective damage from fire, poison, flying, rock, and steel typing, but also resists grass, ground, bug, and dark typing, and takes a quarter damage from fighting type. This one honestly kind of confuses me. I'm not a huge Cutiefly fan, but Ribombee definitely seems like it has its usage. This one, personally, I would put down here in the C tier because I don't think anybody's really going to use it for a lot. It may have some niche case uses, but for me, it's just not good enough to join the ranks of the B tier Pokemon. So we're going to put Ribombee down in C tier on this one. Next up, we have a very easy Pokemon to rank. This is Kommo-o. Kommo-o returning to the DLC. It's dragon and fighting type. Its abilities are awesome. It has bulletproof, soundproof, and overcoat. Its physical attack stat and special attack stat are both great at 110 and 100 respectively. Defense stats are phenomenal. It's not necessarily the fastest, but it's a monster. I mean, total base stat of 600 means that this thing is just, it's in a class all of its own. And I really think that's all we need to say about this one, because this one is probably the easiest S tier that I have thrown on the list so far. Next up, we have one of the strangest Pokemon in the game that I absolutely love. We're talking about Cramorant. Cramorant being flying and water type. It is the Gulp Pokemon, and its ability is Gulp Missile. It's a very weird ability that allows it to return with a fish in its mouth if it uses Surf, and launch that at the opponent if it takes damage. It's weird, but I absolutely love it. Stats are absolutely nothing to write home about on this guy whatsoever. It only takes super effective damage from rock and quad damage from electric, and it has a somewhat decent move pool. Is it ever going to see any usage? Probably not. Are people going to use it on their team? There's a good chance somebody might. It's going down in C tier. It's weird. I understand the appeal, but I don't really see it. So, C tier Pokemon in my book. Next up, we have Morpeko, and Morpeko, let's be honest. Number one, it's just a straight Pikachu clone. We all know this. It's electric and dark type, and it has two modes. It has the full belly mode and the hangry mode. I personally like the hangry mode a lot better. Its base stats, nothing to write home about. It's got 97 base speed and 95 base attack. It's an odd ball Pokemon, but I think everybody kind of loves this one. Morpeko will probably see some use in one way or another, whether it's as a gimmick Pokemon for raids or some niche competitive use or something like that. I love Morpeko. I'm going to put him as a B tier Pokemon. And last but not least, we have one of the newest Pokemon for this generation, new to the DLC, and that is Blood Moon Ursaluna. Blood Moon Ursaluna. Holy cow, this is an easy one. Mind's Eye is the ability, allows it to ignore evasiveness and accuracy change effects, allows it to attack ghost and fighting type Pokemon, or ghost type Pokemon with normal type moves, which is absolutely insane. Base 113 HP, base 120 defense, base 135 special attack. It is ungodly slow. Its moveset is absolutely crazy. And yeah, this guy is nothing to be messed with. This one is probably going to see a ton of usage, not only in people's playthroughs, but in raids, and definitely in the VGC side of things as well. So, Blood Moon Ursaluna, up at the top. It is the final S tier Pokemon on this list. But there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That is my complete, definitive tier list of every Pokemon that is returning to the DLC or is new to the Teal Mask DLC. I only went with final evolutions here because, in my opinion, those are really the only ones that matter and really the only ones that people care about. But that's it. I think that this is a pretty solid tier list and encapsulates this pretty well. There's a couple Pokemon, looking back at it, I might change positions on. I would probably, honestly, put Snorlax up as an A tier Pokemon at the end of this, along with a couple others that are in B tier, now that I've got a little bit more time in the game. But let me know down in the comments below, what do you guys think of this tier list? What would you change, and what Pokemon have you been using the most in the Teal Mask DLC? But that's all for today, guys. Thanks for watching, and as always, I'll see you in the next one. Later.